Hi, this is Manos Berlakis, and this is a different presentation than the usual presentation of cases or interventional topics. This is a presentation on how the Stoic philosophy can help with performing CTO and complex percutaneous coronary intervention. These are some scenarios of complex PCI that can be frustrating. You have been working on an occlusion for 2.5 hours and it's not working, so you just quit. Or you cross the CTO after 2 hours, but then your fellow accidentally pulled the wire out. Or the procedure eventually failed and now you have to talk to the family that has high expectations. Or you had a complication during the procedure. Or maybe you had a bad complication. Maybe the patient died and now you need to explain to the family about what happened. So performing complex PCI and CTO PCI has a lot of challenges. It can be difficult to perform, it can take a long time, it can make you tired, it can fail and you can have complications. And our original approach to this can be suboptimal. It can be with anger or with depression or giving up. And the question is, what can we do to have the best approach to the challenges that we face during complex PCI? And this is where we go back to Greece. This is a picture of the Acropolis. This is the Agora of Athens that is just under the Acropolis. This is where democracy was developed. This is the same picture coming a little further back. This is one of the current metro lines of Athens. And the reason this is important for our discussion is because there was a place within the Athenian Agora called Ποικίλη Stoa that actually was the area where the Stoic philosophy was born. And this is where it was. This is the contemporary image. There's a church there. Close to the church, this is where that Stoa was. And what is that? What is a Stoa? This is essentially a pavilion that is covered, and that's where the ancient Greeks used to go and do shopping and discuss. And this is one of those pavilions where the Stoic philosophy was born by Zeno of Citium, who lived about 2,300 years ago. The Stoic philosophy is a philosophy of life that states that the goal of life is to live according to virtue and achieve tranquility, which is the absence of negative emotions such as grief, anger, and anxiety, and the presence of positive emotions such as joy. So how is this related? How is the Stoic philosophy related with performing complex and CTO PCI? Well, the Stoic philosophy provides certain principles that can be extremely useful on making the best use of our efforts doing complex PCI and in general other difficult endeavors in life. And those 5 Stoic techniques are beautifully summarized in the book A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. Those Stoic techniques are negative visualization, the trichotomy of control, fatalism, self-denial, and meditation, and we'll go through each one of those and discuss how it applies to complex PCI. First of all, negative visualization. What does this mean? It means spending time imagining that we have lost what we value, that things could actually be much worse than they currently are. And this is a solution to the problem of hedonic adaptation, which means once you achieve something, you take it for granted and you want more. How does this apply to complex PCI? Well, it does apply through all stages of the procedure, before, during, and after. Before, it helps us prepare for the complications and the potential failure by thinking the things that could go wrong during the procedure. During the case, that helps us monitor the patient very carefully to detect any potential problems. And after the procedure, even if things did not go well, one can also take solace by thinking that things could have been much worse than they currently are. This is an outline of the various complications of percutaneous coronary intervention. And we should not forget that every procedure we do, whether it is complex or not, carries a risk of having one or more of these complications. And we do have some control for some of those, but not total control. One might argue, well, wouldn't this make us anxious if we start thinking about what could go wrong during the procedure? And yes, it could, but this is why the way we apply negative visualization should be done in a certain way. It should be done periodically, not all the time. And it should not be about worrying about what could go wrong, but actually just imagining what could have happened so that it gives us more satisfaction that things went the way they did. And then we should not forget that every time we do something, whether this is performing PCI or any action in life, this could actually be the last time we do it. For all of us, there will be a last time we do every action, PCI or otherwise. Moving on to the second key concept of the Stoic philosophy, which is about the dichotomy or trichotomy of control. What the Stoics argue is that the things we should worry about are the things that we have control over. It makes no sense to worry about things that we don't have control over. That's futile. And what do we have control over? Our thoughts, actions, goals, and values. How does this apply to PCI? Well, it applies because performing a complex procedure, any procedure for that matter, can have an outcome. And the outcome, yes, depends to some extent from things that we control, but also it depends on things we do not control, such as the patient's anatomy, comorbidities, the other stuff, equipment. And it is possible we do our best in terms of the things that we have control over, but still the outcome may not be the outcome we have wished for. So focusing on the things that we control can be important for optimizing what actually happens during the case. And the things that we have control over is number one, learning. There are many opportunities to learn CTO PCI and complex PCI, both through reading, through virtual courses, through live courses, and taking the time and preparing to do our best can really bear fruit when challenges come during the procedure. We also control what equipment we have in our lab to some extent and whether we know how to optimally use this equipment. We also control what techniques we've learned and how we can apply them to tackle difficult cases. We control what we learn. For example, learning coronary CT angiography can really improve our understanding of complex anatomy and help us derive a plan and troubleshoot live. We control the algorithms that we have developed, the algorithms that help us get through challenging situations. For example, this is the algorithm of balloon uncrossable CTO, and help us develop those mental representations that can carry us through challenging procedures. We also control our algorithms regarding when the procedure should be performed in the first place. And we also control about how much we practice what we do so that we achieve better success, because it's no secret, the more you do something, the more successful you're going to be. Also, it is up to us to go through the different stages of loss fairly quickly if something bad happens during the procedure. And those stages are denial. This is very common when a complication happens, followed by anger, followed by bargaining. Please let me get through this and then I will never do this not so smart thing again. Being depressed, and then finally accepting what was going on and moving on to finding a resolution. So if something unexpected or something negative happens during the procedure, one can think of it as the end of the case and as a depressive event, but also one can reframe it, can think of it in different terms. Perhaps this is an opportunity to show my skills of troubleshoot, and this would actually make an excellent story down the line once I'm able to get through this challenge and find a good solution. Moving on to the third key concept of Stoic philosophy, which is fatalism. And fatalism is accepting what has happened. But it is very important to make the distinction that the Stoics argue to be fatalist not about the future, but because of the past, but only about the past and the present. The reason being, we do have partial at least control about what happens in the future, but we do not have any control about what has happened before. Whatever has happened, and nothing we do now can change it, or at this very moment, because this very moment, again, it is now and it's gone in a second, and we cannot change what happens this very, very moment. But what we can change is what happens in a second, or in an hour, or in a few days, or a few years. These are some of my worst complications. This was a patient with an RCA CTO in whom we used the Tornus device. The Tornus catheter became twisted. It became entrapped into the right coronary artery. The patient ended up having to go for emergent coronary bypass graft surgery to extract the entrapped Tornus device. And this obviously was a fairly depressing outcome. This is how the Tornus looks like after it came out. But it did teach me a lot about how to handle the catheter better, avoid over-rotation, prevent removing the wire to minimize the risk of it getting stuck in the coronary. And I haven't had, knock on wood, the same thing happen again since. This is another case of a complex RCA CTO. We did use the Stingray system, and actually we were able to get into the distal trolumen. We were able to restore integrated flow, but then there was a perforation, and that resulted into a hematoma, intramyocardial hematoma. The patient that had ST segment elevation, and even though the perforation was sealed with coils, the patient eventually died. And obviously this was a devastating outcome, but what had happened, and the approach we took is to actually publish this case along with another similar case that happened a few months later while proctoring at a different lab, in which knowledge of the previous case actually helped us treat such a perforation very quickly and have a good final outcome. Moving on to the fourth concept of Stoic philosophy, which is the self-denial, which is essentially looking for voluntary discomfort. It's something to harden us against misfortune, make us confident about our ability to handle misfortune, and help us appreciate of what is going on. If we have always successes, then we tend to forget that it is quite possible that we do not have success, but our procedure can fail or have a complication. Hardening ourselves against our needs can be very important. For example, some cases are going to be very long, not allowing bathroom breaks or taking food, and having from time to time the discipline to do for a few hours without food or going to the toilet can harden us and help us better prepare us for tackling these complex cases. So these are some ways of applying self-denial to CTO PCI. And this is well represented in the saying you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because this happens quite often during complex PCI. These examples are using different equipment to get familiar with them, start doing more complex cases, or go about without having bathroom and food break. Also asking for help, do not boast and sharing the complication. It is very uncomfortable sharing complications with other people, but it's a tremendous learning tool. And this brings us to discipline, which is one of the highest virtue according to Kazantzakis. This is, the discipline is the only way that what we want to do is actually materializes. Everyone wants to do everything, but unless there is discipline, putting our effort to specific action, nothing can happen. And moving on to the last Stoic principle, which is meditation. This essentially means reviewing what happened during the day, what was our response, and what our response should have been. And another way to think about it is to always think when we perform a case about someone that we trust and respect is observing us, and how would our behavior be if we knew that every single moment someone we trust and respect is watching what we're doing. And one way to do this is by writing and publishing the challenging or the complicated cases. It helps us work through them, or even create a presentation, a PowerPoint, and present through them. This helps me personally a lot to understand what I did, what I could have done different, and how things could be better in the future. What we just discussed in this video are actually written in this article in Neurointervention, how Stoic principles can help when performing complex intervention, that breaks down all these Stoic techniques and describes how they can be applied before PCI, during PCI, and after PCI. This again is not a traditional PCI technical talk. However, our attitude and our approach to simple and complex cases, I believe, can dramatically improve and change if we implement some of those principles in our day-to-day professional and actually personal life. Thank you.